Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money. And we would like to remind you that quoting yourself on social media is literally the most corny thing you can do. Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money. Malcolm, another show, another day, another dollar, as we always say. Yeah. What's going on with you, man? How are you?
Oh, you know, same old same.
Same old same, huh?
Happy to be on set.
Right.
Running my mouth about money.
Indeed.
It's probably something I do in my sleep at this point, so, you know.
Indeed. I have a little bit of a dilemma I need your help with.
Okay.
As you know, we're literally... my family and I, my wife and I, on the cusp of closing on our house. Like, we're a week out right now.
Right.
And there's an issue.
Okay. There's always an issue.
There's a pair of these Nikes that I'm just fiending for.
All right, let's move on. I'm not even going to entertain this as reasonable conversation.
It's not?
Let's move on.
I can't have like a desire or a last thing that I want before I tie myself to this house.
I'm afraid that if I engage in this conversation, it's going to validate what you're saying right now.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just going to ignore you and say, next question.
Next question, of course. Well, I want to remind people that you're listening to Manage Your Damn Money. On this show, we are actually talking about love and money.
Is that why you...
Yeah, I was trying to build drama.
Okay.
Did it work?
No.
Okay, well,
no.
I won't do that again. But we're doing love and money because someone suggested it to us here at Montgomery Community Media. And we're like, you know what? That's a really good idea. Let's do that. But before we get into that, as we always do on every show, it is now time for headlines. Headline this week, Malcolm. NFL rookie Saquon Barkley plans to save his entire $31 million contract. This was a story that came out July 2018 on foxbusiness.com by Thomas Barabi. And the headline is, the article reads, New York Giants rookie running back Saquon Barkley plans to live off of his endorsements income and devote the rest of his NFL earnings to investments and savings, including the $31 million contract he signed with his new team on Sunday, or the Sunday at the time. Barkley, who was taken number 2 as the overall pick, or number 2 overall pick in April's NFL draft, inked a 4-year deal that includes a $15 million payout upon signing, which is insane because he's a rookie.
Yeah.
The deal establishes Barkley as one of the NFL's highest-paid running backs with a league-leading $21 million in compensation for the 2018 season, which is just one season. He's going to get $21 million in his first season.
So what's crazy about that too is it's almost unprecedented. It's guaranteed.
Right.
So one of the biggest gripes about the NFL has always historically been these guys take the most amount of risk physically out of all the professional sports leagues.
Right.
And they're the only one that doesn't have guaranteed contracts as it stands.
They have literally the least secure contracts.
don't know who he has as an agent and what superpower that person has that got him this guaranteed contract.
Right.
But that was the first thing that I read that I was like, man, we might be turning a corner.
Right. Especially for rookies, because rookies are supposed to get like those really bammer contracts. Like Odell Beckham is still playing on like a really
once upon a time, you could, as a rookie, come in the league as the first 3 or 5 draft picks and really blow it out of the water.
Right.
And all of a sudden, collective bargaining agreement was formed, and here's your rookie deal. It's pretty standard. You have to play the first 4 years under this number.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, we're finding that may not be the case going forward. So, I'm very happy for him.
Right.
Also, I'm very happy to hear he's taking the Marshawn Lynch approach and saying, I'm going to live off of whatever endorsement money my name can bring me in the future. Right. But this $31 million, at least the 20 whatever that's guaranteed, y'all aren't getting this back.
Going straight to the bank. And the article went on. For now, Barkley plans to rely on his income from deals with companies like Nike, Pepsi Company, Panini America, and other sponsors for his day-to-day life. He used a portion of the money to buy a home for his parents in Pennsylvania. He was quoted in the article as saying, once I realized when I declared for the NFL draft and kind of realized where I was going to be drafted, that was something I was like, you know what? I kind of want to follow the Marshawn Lynch method. And Marshawn Lynch is like the running back who we know played for the Seattle Seahawks and also for the Oakland Raiders, who hasn't touched any of his earnings over the course of his career.
58 million, something like that he reportedly, that's his contract money.
That's
that
just
he's
sitting.
Never actually tapped into.
Right, absolutely. I don't want to touch that, he said. He said this while at a celebrity softball game event. So this is interesting because I want to point this out because he went on to say, I want to invest it and put it in the right people's hands and learn as I continue to make investments and just live off the endorsement deals. One thing that was interesting to me that I texted you when I saw the story was, even this is like a huge step for athletes to think like, oh, I'm gonna take the money that I initially get and I'm gonna just put it away and only live off the bare minimum of what I could earn through other avenues. But even in his saying, I want to invest it and put it in the right people's hands, in my mind, I'm like, dude, your hands are the right hands, not somebody else.
I hear you, but he's also on the road 250 days a week. I mean, a year. Okay. So there's only so much time he's going to have to dedicate to getting up to speed to learn anything about managing money.
Sure.
So he would be better off, I think, just sitting it in an account in cash that does nothing, but it doesn't lose anything either.
Right.
That maybe nobody else has access to.
Right.
I think that's probably the only for sure safe thing that you could do with it, that you could be able to say, nobody's going to beat me out of my millions of dollars.
Right, absolutely.
But if he really is following the Marshawn Lynch approach, from what I understand, Marshawn Lynch made his mom take personal finance classes so that she could be telling him what to do with his money.
Absolutely.
Because the only person in the world he trusts with his millions is his mama.
Well, and that's good. And I mean, taking that approach or approach similar to that, where you're hiring yourself or hiring someone very close to you to be responsible for it in that way, avoids becoming like the Clinton Portis of the world, where you quote unquote put it in the right hands and then it ends up, you know, you lose half of the value of the money that you had because you're trusting someone who you don't necessarily have to trust and you may not need to trust with what they're doing with your money.
Well, also he's surrounded by some good people in the sense that, like Justin Tuck, for example, who used to play for the same team, the New York Giants, he retired in 2016, I want to say, decided to go back to school, got an MBA after retiring from the NFL, and is now actually working as an investment manager for a major firm.
I did see that story.
So you have people like that who maybe are kind of giving him that mold of, you know, here's the next steps, and that might be what he sees himself as. So maybe by putting it in the right people's hands, it's people who can teach him what to do. Like Kobe Bryant started a venture capital firm, but he's also 50% involved in the decision making, not just the silent partner athlete who's got the millions of dollars. Maybe he's following that model. You know, time will tell.
Indeed.
But it's guaranteed. That's the part that matters the most to me from the first reading of it, the story as it broke. The fact that regardless of what happens to him tomorrow, he sprains his ankle in training camp and all of a sudden he's quote unquote damaged goods, he's still gonna walk away with those millions of dollars for taking that risk with his body. That's a huge step in the right direction to me.
Absolutely. The first thought that I had when I read the story was, finally. Finally, like normally you don't hear about these financial thoughts from athletes until much later in life, or there's like that one-off player who, you know, saved everything but really wasn't that good. Apparently this kid
it's always the guy who's third or fourth round draft pick that's like got a Wharton MBA or something also.
Stashing it all away. And I literally, the very first thing I said was, finally, like somebody coming into the league, getting a large check and saying, I'm going to hold on to this. What a novel concept just to do that rather than do all these other things.
Well, the best quote that I saw to sum this up not too long ago, actually I think it was Justin Tuck that said, these guys have to realize that the NFL is an opportunity and not a career. That once you change your mindset to realize that you're only here for a few years, you make as much as you possibly can and use that to launch you into whatever your actual career is going to be, then it kind of changes the way I think you view those millions of dollars once you get them.
So like, what are the barriers to getting more, or to just getting the athletic culture to think about athletic opportunity in this way? To play professional sports and to take the check and not like go trick at the club. You know, how do you get to a place where more players are assuming this is what you should be doing, rather than what we've seen for so many decades, I guess.
Well, I think part of it is having better role models. Like I was just talking about the guys who are just now retiring within the last 3 or 4 years that are still around and coming back to those players and saying, hey, look, don't listen to, you know, so-and-so that blew $50 million because he had a drug habit and a Ferrari habit and whatever else. Like, I've been to the other side. I've seen the light. Let me take you with me. And you have some guys that fortunately are like, yeah, show me. Like, I don't want to be another statistic. I actually want to do something good. You just saw LeBron James open up a $40-something million school for kids in Akron, Ohio with his own money. Like, that $40 million is a drop in the bucket for LeBron because he's actually been going in the right direction as far as his money is concerned and making it work for him. So fortunately, I think you have a whole nother generation of athletes who's getting to watch the mistakes and the good stuff and saying, I'd much rather be LeBron opening a school or Kobe opening a venture capital firm than Clinton Portis, you know, or whoever else we could name that, you know. So
absolutely. Well, definitely an interesting story. We want to remind people you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Today's conversation at hand, love and money, again, a hot topic that we haven't done in a while.
Gets the people going.
It gets the people going. Indeed it does. But before we take our first music break, I want to remind you can always catch past episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. We'd also like it if you give us a rating and leave us a comment on any of those platforms. It helps us go up in the ratings. If you have a question for Malcolm, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com, and he will answer your question on Malcolm's Money Minute. You can also follow us on social media. Malcolm, what's your Twitter and Instagram handle?
@MalcolmOnMoney.
And of course, mine is @MYDM with a 1 on the end, and always on Facebook.com/Manage Your Damn Money. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Malcolm, today's conversation at hand is love and money. Again, because this is like the second time that we'll be covering this topic. But before we get into that,
but we're covering it differently.
Yes,
say that
we're covering it differently.
We don't want anybody to tune out now saying, "Oh, I heard this already."
It was over a year ago, so I'm sure people, are ready for a refresher on this. But before we get into that, I just want to take a moment to kind of brag on ourselves.
Okay.
Because I have some stats that I pulled from our podcast downloads in particular. And we have downloads coming from some interesting places, interesting countries, which I will now read for you.
Okay.
We have folks in the United Kingdom, so England. Thank you for joining us. Australia, Hong Kong, Switzerland, Japan, South Africa, Singapore, New Zealand,
really,
Estonia, Ireland, France, India, Spain, Peru, Belgium, Brazil, Finland, Norway, Malawi, Argentina, Portugal, Austria, and that's just from the list that I copy and pasted.
We might have got hacked. That sounds like that's a lot. I mean, do we credit Twitter with that? Do we? I really don't know.
We credit the internet for that, for sure. So, bravo.
If you are listening in another country, though, tweet us, send us an email, let us know how you picked up the show, because that is very interesting. Like, when you pointed that out, I was like, he can't read. That's not what that says. But, like, I'm very interested to know how people picked us up.
Absolutely. So if you're in a country other than the United States, give us a shout. Send us an email, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. Tell us where you're listening from. But, of course, as we promised, today's conversation at hand for this episode, love and money. Again, as I mentioned, this is overdue. Over a year ago, we did an incredibly exciting show that spurred a whole lot of conversation. We've been waiting to do this show again, and today is the day. We are doing another Love and Money show. Millennials, money, and love. Would you date someone who isn't well established financially? That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Would you be okay if your woman was the breadwinner? Malcolm, I can't wait to pose you that question. Should you and your partner split the bills 50-50 or according to who makes more? Questions like these are the ones we will tackle in this episode of Manage Your Damn Money. So the first article that I actually pulled, which was, I think, one that I saved for myself because I thought it was interesting. The headline read, "When women make more, couples hide it." Let me say that again. When women make more, couples hide it. And this was a July 2018 piece on CNBC.com by Megan Leonhardt. When women are family breadwinner, when women are the family breadwinner, it turns out neither spouse wants to shout it from the rooftops. New research from the U.S. Census Bureau finds that 1 in 4 heterosexual couples have a non-traditional marriage where the wife makes more than her husband. That's up from just 7% of households in 1970. Yet despite this rising trend, neither men nor women feel comfortable when the wife earns more, and they'll go so far as report otherwise to confirm societal norms, Malcolm.
So that's the amazing thing to me. When I read that, men and women both
that's deep
underreport.
Right.
They both downplay it.
Right.
That was amazing to me.
Right. They're trying to, so the article went on to say that the report examined couples' responses from the annual Social and Economic Supplement survey and compared those answers with tax filings. Husbands on average inflate their earnings by about 2.9% when their wives are the breadwinners. Meanwhile, women reduce their earnings by 1.5% on average when they earn more, according to the study. The article suggests ways to address this kind of household, and that's something else. It was just saying that in these kinds of households, to account for that difference, you should make sure that you're valuing the whole of what you contribute to the relationship. Then it says making sure that you discuss the topic with your significant other. Right, that is cute. And also identify habits that maintain balance and recognition across roles, regardless of who's earning what. Which is an interest. That was the nice couch.
That's cute.
Yeah. But what do you think of that, Malcolm? People hiding that the woman makes more.
I'm not surprised.
Not surprised?
I honestly, I'm more surprised that, as we've had conversations so many times on this show about how women make 75 cents or 80 cents to a dollar, the fact that a quarter of U.S. households still have women making more than men.
Right.
Because if you think about it, if the guy is predisposed to making more, and the woman still makes more,
right,
then that counterbalance would be thrown way out of whack, and you wouldn't even be allowed to lie about it if she actually got paid 100% on the dollar. But that is a whole nother economics lesson that I'm not prepared to teach today. So I think it is very interesting, though, that societally we're just programmed to not be able to have that honest dialogue just yet. To say, there are women who have careers who make more than their husband.
Right. It's interesting to me because I posted something on social media, and I posed the question, would your household be cool if the woman made more? And I got 2 responses.
Okay.
No one responded. There's other things people sound off on, but on this one, people were just crickets. It was 2 people that responded. Literally 2, and both of them were like, yeah, if my woman is making more than me, go ahead. I'm like, where are the traditional, quote unquote, traditional people at? Or is that just like an unpopular thing that you can't share publicly?
Well, I think that might be the reason why there were only 2 public responses. Because I've had this conversation, I don't know, countless times.
Okay.
Among different friend groups.
Okay.
And sometimes you get guys who are honest enough to say, no, I would really have a problem with it. Like, it would really bother me. And other times you get guys that are like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I would care. But you know by the way that it's being said that, nah, he's lying.
What kind of guy are you, Malcolm?
Actually, so I think I've thought about this, and I think I'm very much fortunate in the sense that I consider myself to be somebody who makes a pretty good living as it stands.
Right.
So if I'm with a person who has managed to command a higher income than what I make that I'm proud of, then we're doing pretty daggone good in conjunction, right?
Then I don't need to be complaining.
Right. Then I have nothing to complain about, because if I can tell you, like, yes, I'm doing really well for myself, and then I meet somebody who's also doing well for themselves, and them doing well for themselves just so happens to be more dollars than what I'm able to make, then we're gonna be all right.
We're gonna be all right.
So that's essentially my take on it. Like, I would be motivated, I think, to do a little better maybe if there was a huge disparity, there, or what have you. But fortunately, like, I'm not that concerned with it.
I'll tell you what I think.
Good for you, good for us.
I'll tell you what I think. Baby, keep making all the money. Make way more money than me, because it goes to the household. So that's the kind of person I'm from, and I'm from California. So
you can be a house husband.
And listen, as a native of California,
and walking around the house in your robe in the morning, and
absolutely. When you're from California, you don't care about those gender roles things. That's ridiculous to me. But anyway, another story that we pulled. It's another interesting topic when it comes to love, money, couples, and money. How couples can split their money and the bills to be fair. This was also from a July 2018 piece from dailyworth.com by Cynthia Ramrace. Whether it's through marriage or cohabitation, she writes, there comes a point in most serious relationships when we start talking about bank accounts and savings accounts, investment strategies, and retirement plans. But the big question is, should we split our bills 50-50? Life is complicated, she says, and money is messy. You make more than they do. They have more debt than you do. You have student loans to pay. They have child support payments to keep up with. You're joining lives, but combining assets might be the most complicated part of that exercise. And this is an interesting thing about talking about how complicated your lives become. Because I have recently, like within the last week and a half, had a conversation with my wife about, we were like doing a check, like kind of like not even a financial check-in. We were just talking about stuff. And she hadn't looked at her student loan balance in a long time, because she just has it on automatic and she pays extra towards it and she doesn't even think about it anymore. And she looked and her balance was like, we were both like, what? We were like, and she started like, dancing. She was like, yo, my balance is almost done.
Oh, man.
And I, on the other hand, I look at my balance and it just doesn't change. Even though I throw a whole bunch of money at it, it still just looks at me the same.
That's hilarious to me, because obviously I know your wife, and
right.
I can imagine that. And that whole scenario is hilarious to me.
So it brought up an interesting conversation where we started talking about, like, okay, what if you pay off yours, like let's assume we're able to do that within the next year, do you start saving at a higher rate than me and I just attack those loans? Is it a situation where do we feel compelled to like both contribute to my balance? Like, this is where it gets super messy. I would never ask my wife to pay off my student loans.
Gets a little hairy.
I did that. Like, that's my fault. But it was an interesting discussion in terms of like what interest rate on our savings will we need to surpass whatever the interest rate is on my student loans. You know what I mean? And the subtract, minus and plus and subtraction and whatever else that has to happen when you're doing all that math. And so, but it's complicated.
It's very complicated.
Right.
That's why people pay me. Frankly,
Indeed.
Like I'll be honest, when people ask me to do like student loan payoff calculations and run scenarios for them, it could take my entire day.
Really?
So, I'm talking an 8, 10, 12-hour day, uninterrupted, phone not ringing, not emailing anybody, nothing. It could take me 8 hours to do 4 scenarios for somebody.
Really?
With the amount of math and like what ifs that come into it. Because you got to take into account, like, you guys are buying a house.
Right.
do you own a car? Do you own 2 cars? Do you have daycare to pay for? Do you have child support to pay? Do you have all these different things that factor into the hierarchy of, should I be paying these student loans first, or should I be, the question I get a lot now is, should I be saving more for retirement or paying off my student loans more aggressively? And that's not a and/or, you know, a black and white conversation. That really depends on a whole lot of other variables that then get factored into that math problem that just takes.
See, that's why I went into communications, because that just sounds real complicated to me.
I mean, but once you do have the solution, though, and I think this is the reason that I'm attracted to the profession, I'm solving a puzzle. Like, I basically get paid to sit at my desk and solve a jigsaw puzzle all day. So once you do solve the puzzle, it's like exciting to be able to present this to somebody like, I've got it. Here's what you're gonna do. Here's why. Here's the if and it looks like, you know, you're drawing up a football play at the Super Bowl on a whiteboard. It's actually very interesting to me.
Well, that is a example. Well, first of all, Monica and I need to come see you so you can solve that problem for us. But second of all, like I said, that's a perfect representation of like whether or not, you know, and how complicated these things are. The article went on to say that researchers found from Kansas State University that arguing about money is, quote unquote, by far the top predictor of whether a couple will get divorced, which is interesting. The arguments that we have about these kinds of things tend to take longer to recover from and are more intense. And in 2-income households, the easiest setup is to have individual accounts where both partners maintain their own assets, but then have joint accounts that both fund to pay shared expenses. That's kind of how we do it.
I think that yours, mine, and ours approach solves a lot of headaches. So, you know, I have a couple of friends who I can think of offhand who, kind of to your point with your wife where she wasn't looking at the statements and had no idea what. I have a couple of friends who are guys that they get paid. Paycheck goes into a joint account. The wife takes care of everything, and they have absolutely no idea and no interest in what is actually happening.
Oh, wow.
They just know the lights are on, the mortgage is paid, we have a place to stay, and she's got it covered. For everybody else, they freak out about this back and forth between what's yours, what's mine, what's your fault, what's my fault, what's your responsibility, what's mine. And I think that whole yours, mine, and ours, that bucket of shared expenses and then your separate expenses, probably helps to keep the peace a lot more than trying to figure out why are you spending so much money at, you know, Popeyes or, you know, Cheesecake Factory, and I'm eating at, you know, Capitol Grill or Ruth's Chris.
That's true. So interesting thing, it made some suggestions, this article. It says, what if one makes more? The odds are that you and your partner will earn very different salaries, and those amounts might vary widely. So it is fair in that case to split the mortgage 50-50. The article says no. It suggests splitting expenses by percentage of your income. So essentially, like, you know, whoever's the higher earner, you do the percentages. They pay a certain percentage and you pay the lower percentage. And then also another scenario, deciding who pays for what. What are the shared expenses? As you mentioned, Malcolm, the mortgage, electric, and gas bills are givens because those are things that we need to like live from day to day. But then how do you handle, as we said, student loans, the loan for the car you bought way before you knew your partner, the balance on the credit card bill, maybe that you racked up before you met your partner. All these questions come from honest and deep discussions, which obviously is the only remedy for any of this.
But the discussions is what matters. Because remember, I don't even remember how long ago it was, but I sent you an article that I found where somebody was saying that they hadn't told their partner how much credit card debt they had, and they weren't going to tell them until after they were married, because then they would know for sure if that person was in it for the right reason or something like that. And I said, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, you're guaranteed to get a divorce because you've basically just financially cheated on me, but you're not going to tell me that it happened until after we're married, and there's like nothing you can do about it, or it takes a lot of work to undo it. Like that to me, but it seems more common than, you know, like, you know, the conversation we had not too long ago about if I have student loan debt, do I tell you the exact figure when we first start dating, or even before we get married, or do I wait till, you know, our honeymoon night and I'm like, you know, it's $102,000 like in your sleep, like how do you do that? So I don't know. I mean, it's interesting.
That's funny.
But it still happens.
Indeed it does. Indeed it does. We want to remind people you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Quick reminder, you can always listen to past episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and of course Spotify. Please leave us a review on any of those platforms. That helps more people in other countries listen to our show. And of course, if you have a question for Malcolm that you want him to address on his Malcolm's Money Minute, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. And of course, you can follow us on social media. My handle is @MYDM1. Malcolm, what's yours?
@MalcolmOnMoney.
And of course, that's on Twitter and Instagram. And you can always catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We're talking love and money again. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we are talking about love and money again. Malcolm, so I mentioned I did a poll that no one responded to about
right.
whether or not people would be.
I responded.
You responded just now, but there were people who didn't respond. There was like 2 that responded, but there was another poll that I put up on Instagram that people felt plenty comfortable responding to, which is interesting.
Yeah.
The question was, when is the right time to talk about money with a new love interest? So I got some interesting feedback on that. Like, a lot of people were like sounding off on that. I gave like a couple options. There was like 3 different options. Mm-hmm. One was like when you first meet. The second one was like, you know, something in between, like where you're dating and kind of getting serious. And the other one was like not until marriage. But the first thing that someone said was from My Life on a Budget. Within the first few dates, she says, as you get to know someone, the relationship with money shows up organically. And then Give Me More Monica says between when it's official and when marriage is in sight, certainly before moving in together. So that's kind of in that gray area when you know where it's going. So that makes sense. And then See the Crown says, I was told I should mention my debt on the first date. I'm also assuming attractiveness has something to do with it. I don't really know what that means. I think she's saying on a sliding scale of someone's attractiveness.
I get that. Which if someone's more attractive, you're more willing to see this through and see where the debt takes you.
If you find, well, I could make some excuses for your finances.
That's interesting that she was willing to admit it out loud, because I'm sure it exists.
For sure. Well, girl, he broke, but he fine. Golly. Then Foxy Roxy 619 says, within the first few dates, maybe not too personal, but you can feel out their money habit. Certainly you can see how they move and operate, just like whether they're splitting the bill or like paying for it or what they say or don't say. And then Tiffany Brielle says, the first few dates, talk in general terms and get a sense of their mindset and then go from there. So that's interesting of like where people think the conversation should start.
I think whoever said on the first date is out of their mind.
Yeah, that's wild.
First of all, people are still lying in the first few dates about who they actually are.
Right.
So talking to me about your finances, I can't believe anything you say yet because, like, you know,
right.
I don't even know if that's your real hair color yet. So let's take it one step at a time.
Right. For sure.
But whoever said after we're married also is asking for trouble.
Right.
Because, I mean, come on. So there's got to be a happy medium somewhere in there.
For sure. Well, another story that addresses that very question, how to talk about money on a first date. This was an August 2017 piece on CNNmoney.com by Julia Carpenter. According to a survey from Bankrate, almost half of all Americans living with a partner say they've argued about money. The seeds of these fights can be planted as early as the first date, as we mentioned. According to the Bankrate analyst Sarah Berger, a third of millennials surveyed said they prefer to split the check, but more than 40% of women surveyed said they still allow men to pay for the entire date. I think Sarah was quoted as saying, women and men vary so significantly in talking about who should pick up the entire bill. People are hesitant to talk about money in the early stages of dating. And then as they get more serious, you might have mismanaged expectations if you didn't have enough conversations or, you know, effective enough conversations on the front end. So how do you set those expectations early on, Malcolm? The article suggests you, number one, start slow. To start, ask some simple questions that indirectly tell something about how the other person thinks when it comes to money. Questions about background and upbringing inevitably lead to questions about how you're different from your parents or what you learned from them. And if you were dating me, then money was definitely like sprinkled in there somehow, some kind of way. Another thing it suggests, don't get into the numbers just yet. There will come a time when you know your sweetie's salary, credit score, and monthly budget.
Right.
But that is not on the first date, as you said earlier, Malcolm. For example, now is a good time to get an idea of whether someone is a saver or a spender. Do they have fear or confidence when it comes to managing their money? So those are like nice, like, I call it, this is a good old man analogy, putting your foot in the jacuzzi questions.
That's your old man analogy.
That's my old man analogy. But you can see what it is, exactly what I mean. Another one that they suggest is that you don't judge. Explore, but don't pry, because those two things are different.
That's tough, though.
Really?
Like, not asking follow-up questions. So, you know, you tell me that you went to community college, which is either free or a couple $1,000s,
right.
And then you tell me that you have $50,000 in debt. I can't ask follow-up questions. Like, you know, so
I'm a little confused.
From that perspective, like that you might as well not ask at all if that's, you know, if that's the case.
Right. Well, the article says, so say the other person immediately quizzes you on your credit score, or maybe he or she is bragging about a huge purchase to your absolute horror. If you genuinely feel a connection, Hughes says you should say something about these road bumps right away. Then something else that the article says, save the super serious stuff for later. After you've built up some trust with the other person, you can tiptoe towards more sensitive topics like the shame he or she may feel around debt or the savings goals they have set for, you know, the next year or next couple years or whatever it might be.
See, I also think, though, if you're going into it being completely honest, you pay attention to what that person does or doesn't do.
That's true.
So if you're dating somebody and every time you talk to them, they're spending $25 on dinner.
Right.
Or every time the weekend comes, they're, you know, going to the mall to spend $100 on something.
Right.
Those habits don't suddenly disappear because you fall in love with them.
Sure.
So you can't expect then that all of a sudden that person's going to change those things just because you show up.
Right.
So you saw the signs. You chose to ignore the signs and not even have a conversation to try and, you know, modify them. Right. That's on you. You chose to take that shot. So in that case, I think a lot of times folks see the habits, the behavior, and then just say, you know, it'll change because I'll say something or I'll do something that'll make it
interesting.
You know, change later.
Interesting.
Which is a bad way to go about it, in my opinion.
Well, it's interesting you say that because it makes me think of the first conversations that I had with my wife when we were like getting to know one another. I don't remember any explicit conversations, but she reminded me of something. We were driving on Rockville Pike recently in Maryland, and she said she remembers a particular parking lot because a long time ago when we were first getting to know one another and dating, she said she called me and was crying because she said she didn't have any money left. And this is when she was living with her parents. Like, her financial habits were horrible. I helped her a lot with it just because she didn't know. But she was like, that's the parking lot I was in when I called you, and I didn't have any money. And I was like, you were living with your parents. What you mean? And she was like, yeah, I called you, and you, like, helped me out or whatever, and I had no memory of it. But it's interesting because, like, that we just had that conversation, like, within the last week or so.
I think you guys are fortunate that you both started off broke together. So it's an easy conversation to have when there's nothing to talk about.
Right.
But it's tougher, I think, when you meet, you know, in your late 20s, mid 30s, even 40s.
That's true.
Where now both of you are established or should be established adults. Right. And you're trying to figure out a way to make this thing work. Right. Then it's a lot more sketchy, I think, to be able to try and figure out how to maneuver that conversation. Right. And I don't think necessarily it's that difficult for our generation in comparison to the two before us, our parents and Xers. Like, if I think about how taboo it used to be to talk money, to ask, you know, how much does a house cost, or ask somebody how much they spent for something. Our generation talks about what things cost very freely and openly in a way that, like, when I was a kid, that was like just off limits. Do not, like, ask somebody how much they spent on something or you know, whatever. So maybe some of it just comes from that. Like, we have more of an open sharing culture as a generation. So talking details around money is just the next iteration of that. Right.
Absolutely. So question for you: when clients come in to you, like married clients, what's the approach to dealing with all these different financial elements to their lives? How do they prioritize?
So
things?
Something I learned, and I don't even remember where I stole it from to give the person their due credit, but something I started implementing like maybe a year and a half, close to 2 years ago, was I start off the meeting, one of the very first questions I'll ask a couple is, tell me some places that you guys flat out agree when it comes to money. Oh, wow. And then some places that you guys disagree when it comes to money. And I just listen to the things that they talk about. And 9 times out of 10, they'll bring up something that they've never talked about together. Oh, wow. Or they'll say it in some detail that the other person's like, wait, what?
What are you talking about?
Like, you know, and it doesn't matter how old they are, because it could be, if they're older, it's things like, how much do we help out our adult children, or how much money do we want to leave to our kids versus leaving to charity. Right. Or for a younger couple, it's like, how much do we want to help our kid go to college? How much are they going to be on the hook for themselves? Should they get loans altogether? I mean, there's always something different no matter how old they are and what stage they're at. Right. But there's always something that they differ on that they haven't really put much emphasis on how much they differ, because it's like, well, why would we talk about that? It doesn't come up in real life. And so I try my best to get those kind of things out there in the open as early as I can, so that I can kind of gauge, like, where their inclination is when it comes to their money, and then figure out where that happy medium is so I don't get fired.
Indeed. And all that, again, underscores how complicated that a married couple might not come across some of these questions that you pose. Because it's such a complicated thing, we do have a couple of things that we remind people for those when dealing with money and love. Do remember that thoughts about money are deeply intimate. Like, we were talking about, it was a couple weeks ago, my wife and I were talking about my student loans, and like talking about them, literally, I'm sharing a really deep, intimate situation here. I was literally unable to speak for like periods of like 10 and 15 seconds.
It's like having somebody, everybody's different, right? So for some people, it's not that personal. Right. For me, it is. Like, it's extremely personal to me. So for some people, you know, it's just, here's what I got, here's what it is, you know, whatever. I could care less. And for other people like me, and presumably you, like, it's almost like saying, talk to me about your childhood, you know, like, talk to me about your relationship with your parents. How did that make you feel? And on that day they didn't get you that horse you wanted for your birthday. What did you do? Do you still cry about that when you go to sleep? Like, it's almost down those lines of meeting with a psychologist and them asking you questions about things you tried to repress and forget. Like, that's kind of how, you know, so I get what you're saying, where it's like you get to a point where it's like, I have to have this conversation. But I still really don't want to have this conversation. So let's talk about the Cowboys, because that I can do all day. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly. And with that being said, remember, if you're a person who is dealing with another person talking about money, and you're a potential love interest or a love interest, it should be dealt with care and caress. My wife was very patient as I worked through my speechlessness in talking.
Your wife is very patient to deal with you in general, but we'll save that for a whole nother episode.
Another thing that you got to remember: avoid judging.
Yes.
Be willing to listen, as Malcolm pointed out just a few moments ago. Money has everything to do with how we were raised and what we've experienced or interpreted from the world around us. So be willing to make adjustments as a team. And that's just our 2 cents from here at Manage Your Damn Money on that.
I think those are all pretty salient points. Obviously, I'm super biased, but I think we handled it pretty well.
Indeed. Well, this has been another show, another Love and Money show from Ben and Malcolm here on MYDM. We want to remind people that you can always catch past episodes on our show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and of course Spotify. I'd like to encourage you to leave us a review or a comment on any of those platforms. That helps more people come across the show. If you have a question for Manage Your Damn Money, the show, or for Malcolm's Money Minute, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com, and you can always catch us on social media. Malcolm, what's your handle for Twitter and Instagram?
@MalcolmOnMoney.
And of course, mine is @MYDM with a 1 on the end, and you can always catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/Manage Your Damn Money. Thanks again to our partners here at Montgomery Community Media for yet another amazing show. Until next time, be good with your money.
Peace.
Peace.